wondering, but I'm thinking at this challenging time, Chuck, I want to enter this into our meeting minutes too, since I have a prepared discussion. And after I get done with what I have to say, I'd be interested in hearing from other NMC members' reactions to what's been happening in light of past week's announcements by Entergy, to maybe briefly weigh in for a minute or two or three, one at a time. Our committee discussions for the posted agenda may end up being tempered a bit in light of Entergy's corporate's public announcement last Tuesday regarding the status of Pilgrim's current operation and decision to close by or prior to 2019, pending economic considerations and the outcome of additional intensive NRC planned inspections that will be transpiring in the coming weeks and months. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank Plymouth Selectman David Malaguti, who's sitting in for Selectman Committee Liaison John Mahoney, who will be arriving a bit late due to another town school committee commitment. Now, David holds a special place in my NMC heart. I recall speaking with David back in 2004 after my wife and I moved to Plymouth regarding consideration for joining the newly reforming NMC. Since becoming chair about 3 years ago, and as of last June's BOS committee interview and appointment meeting, David still holds a special place. I believe it was David's statement to the other Board of Selectmen members about our recent top 5 Pilgrim Issues report and agreeing that the NMC size needed to be expanded to accommodate our newest member, along with the 3 incumbents who were reappointed, that helped to recognize the real importance of the NMC to the town of Plymouth. And that need and importance has certainly grown since last Tuesday. I did not know about Entergy's Tuesday announcement until last Friday afternoon after returning from a week's vacation out of the country. A close friend of mine had left a welcome home phone message on Friday, also saying, of course in jest, that I might also be out of my NMC job by 2019, and I should check the recent news. After plowing through hundreds of emails, catching up on many Boston Globe and local newspaper articles regarding Pilgrim's situation, I have it.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late.
Yeah, get comfortable. Come around this way. I'm just reading some prepared comments starting their meeting.
Michelle?
Okay. I did not know about Entergy's Tuesday announcement until last Friday afternoon after returning from a week's vacation out of the country. A close friend of mine had left a welcome home phone message on Friday, also saying, of course in jest, that I might be also out of my NMC job by 2019, and I should check the recent news. After plowing through hundreds of emails, catching up on many Boston Globe and local newspaper articles regarding Pilgrim's situation, and attending the fall town meeting on Saturday, where I had the opportunity to speak with some of our town officials, I was still pondering until late last night, what can I say to start this NMC meeting in light of Entergy's announcement? What do I need to say? Yes, in the coming weeks and months, our committee will continue to be addressing the myriad of important issues and topics: plant safety and security, plant and environmental monitoring, emergency preparedness, plant shutdown and decommissioning, spent nuclear fuel storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Revisiting and perhaps even updating our April top 5 Pilgrim Issues report, but perhaps now with formal recommendations, and addressing any new charges or assignments to be received from the Board of Selectmen in light of Entergy's announcement last Tuesday. In accordance with our current NMC Charter mission statement from last October, we are still addressing an operating Pilgrim plant for the time being. Let's not forget that. But this evening, I want to say something especially to the Entergy members present, and also briefly touch upon the personal impact, the human side from my own past professional speed bump experience that they may be able to relate to. Yes, everybody in this room has likely experienced a speed bump at one point or more in their lives and careers. The most poignant one that comes to mind was in 1983, when I was in my early 30s, with a roughly 11% home loan mortgage rate and a very young growing family. I was double board certified in my professional environmental consulting field and nationally recognized by the time I reached age 30. All that didn't matter, however, when the economy tanked in my field during the early Reagan administration years. So my wife and I started a cheesecake bakery business out of our house. We were serving the Buck Steakhouse chain in Connecticut and Massachusetts. I sold, she baked. I was pounding nails on some new home construction to help pay the bills while I was seeking new employment. 10 months later, I found new employment in my field, but unfortunately it was out of state. So I commuted back and forth for 3.5 years between work and spending time with my family on weekends. While sleeping on
Okay, everyone.
Hey, Francis, and while sleeping on a metal spring bed in a small rented room in the executive wing at the local White Plains, New York YMCA, by the way, a $7 a night rate to help save some money, I think Whitey Bulger may have had better living accommodations at the Plymouth County Correctional Facility during his trial. I would look at this picture daily to remind me of why my wife and I were making, it still hurts, why my wife and I were making these personal lifestyle sacrifices for the sake of our family to stay viable in my professional occupation that I loved. In 1986, employment conditions improved, and I ended up working back close to home at Combustion Engineering Resource Recovery Systems. CE was a large internationally recognized company, especially known for its power generation boiler steam supply systems and air pollution control equipment for both fossil fuel-fired and nuclear power plants. I was very excited and proud to be part of that municipal solid waste energy division, and I was responsible for the air quality licensing and environmental permitting for $500 million planned facilities, which are still operating safely and in compliance with their permits, as far as I know. To me, the feeling of working there was akin to like being good enough and being able to play on the current New England Patriots football team. Being Jewish, I felt like Julian Edelman coming to work. It was hard, demanding, high-pressure work, but I enjoyed every minute of the challenges and the tremendous responsibility on my shoulders. Frank, I'm sorry you got here a little late.
I apologize.
Yeah. No, you wanted a statement. I'm making a statement, as I usually do in our meetings when I do it. Unfortunately, a different kind of speed bump occurred in 1989. CE was starting to sell off some of its assets and disband its divisions due to economic challenges, competition with other companies, and new state and federal regulatory requirements impacting the waste energy business sector. So I began a new job in my profession and have remained in Massachusetts since 1989. Why am I recanting all of this? I'm sorry if I took a little bit more time here, but why am I recanting this? Because with all of the past professional challenges and adversity, I never lost sight of the target I needed to maintain. Work situations may change, but people don't have to. I was told quitters never win and winners never quit. And live fish swim upstream and dead fish float downstream. I trust, most importantly, and I'm speaking from the head and the heart, because I've been in your shoes. And a lot of people could have done different things where I've been in the past when we knew the company division was going to go under or sold or whatever. But I trust that the workers at Pilgrim will continue to strive to maintain operating the plant as safely as possible and within their authority and purview. As Belichick says, you do your job no matter what the adversity is. Even though I'm now retired, I can look back and still be proud of my resume, and you should be proud of yours. I've gotten to know you through your willing participation at our monthly NFC meetings. If you may need to move on professionally after Entergy permanently closes Pilgrim within the next few years, I would be pleased to serve as a professional reference if that could be of any help. I've got a 100% success record in helping to place many dozens of individuals and other companies over the years. That's all I have to say, and thank you. I'm going to take a 2-minute recess. When I come back, I'd like some other committee members to possibly weigh in if they have any other quick thoughts or comments.
Don't worry about this stuff.
If you get the copy.
This is all because of Megan. Megan? This is all because of you.
I'm not really strong at math, 45-year-old plant. And it's showing, it has been showing its age, and it will continue to show its age. And I think for the last, certainly for the last year, not longer, it's been obvious what's going to happen. And I think, most of us realize that. The Nuclear Matters Committee is here to serve at the behest of the Board of Selectmen. And it's our job to be responsive in whatever you need us to do. And we have a mission statement. We've been following that mission statement for a long time. And if there's anything, whatever, I just want to give this message to you, whatever you need us vertically to do in response to this situation, obviously we're ready to do. And we have a lot of knowledge of that industry, of the NRC, and of the plant that I think could be really well leveraged by the board. That's my comment.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else?
I would only repeat what Mr. Berger said, so I shan't. So what we're seeing is the confluence of deregulation and the effects of fracking, and in a world that we've privatized. A sad statement. We lost 600 of our best friends.
Thank you. We'll move on to public comment period. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to announce at the beginning of the meeting, Joe had some other commitments. He couldn't be here tonight, so he apologized. I believe he had sent an email to the committee too, to that effect, before he went out of town. Okay, no one for public comment. So I think maybe before we get, I'd like to shift one thing around in case John can get here a little earlier to the meeting, and perhaps maybe let's just go through a few other things. Chuck, can we do the September meeting minutes now? Okay, when we
Has everybody received it? The only changes that have been made, I inadvertently included you in the meeting. You weren't there.
I'm abstaining.
And there was a minor edit, a few minor edits that Paul made in the notes with respect to what he had to say. Do you want to comment on those?
Only that certain statements were ascribed to me that really weren't. I wasn't the author.
Okay.
I believe Selectman Mahoney was.
You're correct.
So.
Short of that, does anybody want to read them?
Well, we've all received copies of it electronically.
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, one abstention. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's jump to, nothing new from Aaron Wallace at the moment. Let's jump to one old business item I had, and that was Jan Sullivan, the acting director of Mass Department of Public Health, Bureau of Environmental Health Planning, wanted to visit our NMC. We were hoping she was going to be able to visit this month, since you're in town, Jeff, but that's not going to happen. The only date that was available for them to be down here because they wanted to I believe, piggyback to meet with the Duxbury Nuclear Committee folks afterward. It was Thursday, November 19th, at 4 o'clock in this building. And Paul and I just checked before the meeting started, and it looks like the room will be available. I don't think they'll be here for more than an hour, hour and a half at the most. So Paul will be getting in touch with Kara Sardone, who works for Jan Sullivan, who's coordinating their being here, and go over any logistics. I don't know if they're going to need any projection equipment or anything
I'll
to
find that
compare,
out.
but I think Dustin is the person, or Carolyn handles that, and then
Can I have his email address if you do?
and what I'll do is we'll still be having our regular Monday, I think it's November 16th, Nuclear Matters Committee meeting at our regular time, 7 o'clock. And then I'll not only post that, but I'll do a separate posting for our Thursday meeting with the Department of Public Health. At this point, I know everyone may not have their calendars, but does anyone know if they might not be available on a Thursday in that month as opposed to normally being here Monday for a regular meeting?
Yeah.
If we have a quorum, if people fine. If we don't, it's not an official meeting, but we can still have the DPH do their discussion and presentation. And I know at the moment Paul and I definitely are going to be there.
I would caution the new members to the committee that it starts at 4 in the afternoon, and that's for the convenience of the director or so.
We tried to get, let me just say, Paul, we tried to get them here at 6 like the last couple of years, but it's just not, because some people work and other,
What are we talking about? What meeting is this?
This is, you have the agenda? If you go to the old business, Jim, 702, that's first bullet, Jan Sullivan, acting director. She was going to give us an update on the real-time radiological monitoring program status and other environmental monitoring, tritium monitoring.
Okay, and then she's gonna have a meeting on a Thursday?
That's the only time they can get here. So we're going to have 2 meetings that week.
So that's, what date?
Thursday, November 19th at 4 in the afternoon. And I'll be, I'll send an official.
And it's here?
Yes, Paul and I confirmed that today, that the building will be available.
I would recommend we schedule it as a NMC meeting, and then if we don't get a quorum, we can just not have a meeting.
Yeah, it'll be posted, and if we have a quorum, fine. If not, there'll still be a meeting, whether it's official or unofficial. We want to.
Rich, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is the regular NMC at 7? Are we reverting back to 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did this at 6:30 because I thought we might be getting into more depth on some other topics, but a little serendipity too. It's good we're starting a little earlier in light of Energy Corporate's announcement last week too. But we normally start at 7 o'clock, so that hasn't changed. I do have one thought about before DPH does get here, and one of the things that we've been pushing for as a committee for quite some time is to see that the DPH, provided they could get additional funding, expand the existing off-site radiological and meteorological monitoring network even beyond the current 3 additional sites in town at Gurnet, Colony Place, and Town Wharf, to also populate the area with some additional monitors at key locations within the 10-mile Plume EPZ distance. And we know that some of the other surrounding communities, and even in Cape Cod, some people have been clamoring for having additional real-time monitoring out that way. From my own perspective, will that happen? Will there be a need for that to happen? Since Entergy has made its intentions known about planning to close the plant by 2019 or before, one thing I want to quiz DPH about is the does that impact in any way whatever their plans may have been moving on to expanding the monitoring network? I don't know if Jan will have an answer to that, let alone an answer to, because she was coming up to speed, as I mentioned last month, and wasn't familiar at all with what had been going on with Suzanne Condon running the show on that. So, but that's an important question, I think. Jeff?
Question for you. As a meteorologist, when you first looked at that map that we'd all seen, your reaction to it was that the arrow points in directions that winds will follow, and that there were eddies and other things and sea breezes and other things that didn't interfere with that.
Yeah.
When you see the location, the 3 locations of the monitors in this system that hopefully they'll be going live pretty soon. How do you react to those from your kind of unique perspective as a meteorologist? Are those adequate to tell where plumes might go throughout the town, or are they not?
I'm gonna have to think back to what I said about 4 years ago when we had a 1-hour discussion about the whole thing. But in a nutshell, remember back in 2006, we had Dr. Bruce Eden come in,
Yep.
and he did a presentation on wind field modeling in terms of how monitored data, whether it's real-time meteorological data, real-time or historical, can go into these sophisticated wind field models that can draw the arrows where there's no data being measured, just to prognosticate what's going on, so that information can go into sophisticated air quality dispersion models to predict, okay, given this is what the winds are doing, or should be doing, where plumes could be going. Sort of a forecast type of thing. Or if it was actually happening in real time, a nowcasting thing, or if you wanted to look back, say, what did happen, where did the plume go, where there, just for insurance reasons, liability, cleanup, what have you there. So anyways, in terms of how many monitors do you need, I think at the time, I was recommending to DPH when they got funded in 2010 or 11, that Dr. Egan was working for them, that he should be doing some meteorological studies, sighting studies, to see where else do you need to put monitors. Because you may recall, Jeff, during his presentation, he says, we can be pretty close to what we think is going on with these data points, but we could be really close with the grid we have if we had 1 or 2 more monitors here, there, or there. So that's part of the question mark. The other is, in terms of EP versus replanning, what I just mentioned is the former reason. The latter reason is you probably want to have some monitors too, where you have large population centers, such as a Colony Place where people shop. Especially if you have to worry about if you're working at if you're at the MEMA and also in the EOF, and you're trying to advise folks at the EOC on when do you evacuate or possibly evacuate, where, or shelter in place there, having some real-time information might be useful. Now, Entergy could always be sending out teams of people with DPH in vehicles to do measurements there, but there may be some critical areas where instead of worrying about that and getting through traffic, whatever else, having a real-time monitor. So that was part of the decision. I remember advising Suzanne Condon about some of these concepts at the time before they had planned it out. But in terms of the other thing is in terms of prevailing winds. Your prevailing winds are southerly and southwesterly. So in terms of if there ever were an accident there, in terms of number of hours per year, the winds are blowing a lot in this direction as opposed to very frequently in that direction, all things being equal, you'd probably want to have a monitor in a more of a prevailing direction too, from that standpoint.
Like downtown.
Yeah, so I think that DPH has done in a nutshell from a practical standpoint. And also Duxbury Board of Selectmen approved Duxbury's Nuclear Committee's Pilgrim Watch's request at the time to spend, I think, $18,000 or $20,000 to put a monitor down at the Harbor Master in Duxbury, because they felt that they didn't have anything, even though there's one in Gurnett, they still needed to have. So they did do that. So there's actually 4 monitoring stations. But how much is enough? I know that. Not to diverge, but I know that a lot of public interest groups and activist groups also say, we ought to be peppering all southeastern Massachusetts. Let's put a whole, one moment, Paul.
Yeah.
Let's put a whole ton of monitors out on Cape Cod and a lot of different places there. What's your objective? What's your goal? Are you trying to be accurate on the concentration value there, or try to hit the plume wherever it is? The plume disperses. That's why you have models available, because you can't afford to put monitors everywhere. That's why, as the sectors get bigger, as you get further out, that's where the modeling also comes in too. So, in 25 words or less, that's my answer to your question.
Thank you.
Paul, I'm sorry.
Okay, and out of respect to the good Selectman Malaguti, the other half of that story though. And everything Mr. Rothstein said is correct and it is accurate. But what we also found in our investigation is MEMA doesn't use it. They don't use the local area monitors to make their actions, their protective actions.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and then the other aspect of it is, as the good Ms. Codman would explain to us, it's not intended to be a predictive measure where it would actually change the routing of how people would evacuate. It'd still evacuate the exact same roads that they would evacuate. So, and now with the announcement of this past week, and what we understand it takes to get budget items through the state, which is like a town, it's large, it has its inertia. Would there even be funding for such items in time before the EPC actually shrank? So just so that you can make informed decisions. And that's not to disagree with the good Mr. Austin. Everything he said is true. And
Can I make a couple of comments?
Sure.
I respectfully disagree with you, Paul, on 2 counts. Number 1, MEMA doesn't use the data because the data is not coming in yet. The systems I've talked to, I talked to Suzanne about that. I talked to some other people there about that. And what Suzanne told me just before she left, Suzanne Condon, was that the system was still being tested this year. That you might have some other word about that when you see them next month.
Yeah. They wanted to test the first measure.
Yeah.
Data.
But it was still being tested, and they want to make sure it's doing its job and is accurate, before they put it online. So the objective was to get a working system and then put it online, and then work with that delegation in Boston to make sure that MEMA becomes convinced that it needs to use this. MEMA's one of the problems with MEMA before is that they were using local forecasts of the Weather Channel to make decisions about evacuation or sheltering in place. Both of which are, in my humble opinion, rather absurd, because they don't talk about anything like local monitoring or local modeling. So they don't take anything like that into account. And there's nothing that's done in sufficiently fine grain to be able to make it worthwhile to use the Weather Channel or some other sources. You need to use the sources that are available and are accurate and proven, which these will be, I expect, quite soon. That's number 1. Number 2, I also disagree about it being predictive. I think with modeling, tied into this, I think it will be capable of being predictive. If it didn't have that capability, I don't think it would be worth doing. And one of the reasons that we've been promoting this for the last several years is because we expected it to be predictive. Using the modeling and using the real-time monitoring, you get a handle on where it's going now and where it's highly likely to go, and that would enable MEMA to give directions, which make more sense. So that's, I
No, no,
respectfully
so-
disagree on those two.
No,
things.
so what the good selectman should get out of this is, it's not a simple subject.
No,
Yeah.
it isn't.
Jeff,
I know that.
Jeff, you jogged my memory on one, I just want to embellish one point. To the predictive emissions and dispersion modeling there. I live at the southern tip of the Pine Hills Ridge, and I've seen very funny things happen with wind directions where the winds at the lower levels, maybe the lowest 500 feet are doing that, and the winds 1,000 feet up are doing that. You get clashing sea breeze fronts and coastal fronts happening there. What I like to see happen, I have my home instrumented too. I don't record data, it's real time. But what I'd like to see from some studies that I suggested several years ago to DPH as they were unfolding their program is when you, for example, get a sea breeze condition, and here's Cape Cod Bay, it's not blue, but it's close enough, and the winds are coming in like this, and they go down around the Pine Hills Ridge area or that, the wind's making a right turn after a certain point. If 95% of the time the winds do certain things from real-time data that's been collected and analyzed there, and in the unlikely event of a radiological emergency there, you get a weather day like that, that's very useful information, I would hope, to the UF folks in NEMA once they buy into this, and be able to make informed decisions, like, geez, we got two places we could evacuate there. Should we do this area or that area there? And again, I'm just giving a simple example of the power of having more information to work with in a crisis situation. So,
It certainly seems like the more monitoring you have to put.
yeah, but there's a practical standpoint because if you get too much information, unless you're feeding into a computer and it's being processed, it depends on the type of accident too. If it's a fast breaking one, if in terms of a potential, this is what I told the NRC chairwoman in a letter I sent back in December 2013 that they need to have a better communication flow to the public about the nature of accidents. If most of the time, if there was going to be a major one, the plant wouldn't have to be released emissions before a day or two or three, as opposed to an hour or two. That's useful. So all this comes into play too. It's not simple stuff, but it's not impossible to sort out in a logical fashion if there's the will and interest and need to do so. Jim,
Yeah, question for Paul and Chuck. I can understand all this monitoring when we have a real active reactor down there, but when they close down, what's going to happen is it's going to be moved to the spent fuel pool, and just how dangerous is the spent fuel pool? If we lose cooling water, I realize it could possibly melt down, but has there ever been an incident like that?
Well, I think to respond to that, what you see at the other plants that are decommissioning is after a specific period of time, a nominal 5 years, in fact, even shorter than that, the EPZ will shrink, okay, because you can't
EPZ being?
the size of your emergency planning zone, what you have to consider. Because you don't have the neutron source there, you don't have the power available to have the accident that would cause Fukushima type event. If you look at Fukushima, one of the lessons learned from it was there were 3 units that melted down, lost their primary containment, lost their secondary containment. And still with all of that.
But that was a reactor, not
That was the reactor.
not the spent fuel.
So without the reactor, for instance, like your dry casks just sit there. There is no cooling necessary for them at all. So once everything's in dry casks, if you take it to extremes, there's no potential for an accident.
Heather, you have a comment?
I just wanted to say, until everything is in dry casks, though, wouldn't you want that level of protection? There is still there's a threat of a spent fuel
They just said
fire. That's but
after
just
5 years.
Just an observation on the spent fuel pools. We had these 3 operating reactors that had meltdowns. We had
I know that's one case.
explode. and the roof and all the debris fell down into those fuel pools. And there was no fuel damage in any of those fuel pools, even with those horrendous situations and loss of all power, and for an extended period of time, there wasn't any failure of any of the fuel.
That's
And
one,
fuel
that's
pools.
one example. That doesn't mean that that it couldn't
Well,
happen. It's a-
so an example, we got the
The example you're talking about is if, what could happen to the fuel where there's no operating plant, and there would be no basis for an explosion, and
But there could be a spent fuel fire that would
well,
cause a
that would
release.
require loss of all.
If I could just interject here, we'll get a little more intel from the DPH in November about their intentions. And even if they don't have the manpower or funding, we know that there are some bills floating out there at the state legislature that are trying to push for additional funds coming from Entergy to help support enhanced monitoring. Now, as long as the plant is operating, it's still operating, and it could operate till 2019. So that, let's see first what DPH is planning on doing or not doing at the moment there. And I believe those state legislative bills, Heather, are being debated in November. I thought I saw something or discussed at the state level.
I'm not really involved with that.
Okay, I thought I saw something in one of the newspaper articles over the weekend that was mentioning that. And I know that as we've seen in Vermont Yankee, that the size of the EPZ need to monitor has shrunk, all things being equal. So what I was talking about before is more from the scientific and technical standpoint, but from the legal and regulatory standpoint, I haven't gotten into that, and I don't want it tonight, but to be continued.
No, if I could, though,
Yeah.
just to summarize, we don't disagree, really. When all the fuel is in dry casks, certainly there's no need for an EPZ then. So
That's right,
somewhere in
but-
between, then that's all we're discussing, is we're in between.
Wouldn't you still want it though, even when everything is in dry cask storage?
There'd be no need. It's,
Is it being done anywhere around the country as far as you know?
no,
Where dry cask has been
not a
going on
Yankee
for
row,
several, 2 or 3 decades.
not gonna be in Vermont.
Trish,
Jeff?
this is my night to disagree with Paul. I disagree on that perspective as well. And again, I know the dry casks that, I've read that the dry casks that were in use at Fukushima, some of them wound up underwater. And how many, I don't know. But I know that most of them did not have any leakage. Some leakage meaning into the cask itself. I believe some of them did. And I know also that dry casks that have been close to the ocean, in some cases, have also had corrosion. And
Indications of corrosion.
okay. So I just. And again, we're sufficiently new using dry casks that again, we don't know what we don't know. So I would rather see us err on the side of caution and keep the EPZ, at least where it is. I don't agree that there's no need.
I think.
Well, it'll be certainly open to discussion, and it's
Sure.
and much discussion, because the population will have to be satisfied. But you can take the spent fuel, you can take it out of the cask, you can lay it down on the ground. It doesn't go anywhere.
The other question about casks is that if the whole facility is decommissioned, and basically brought down, which is the intent of decommissioning, is to bring down the buildings. And then you have the casks there. If a cask needs to be changed out, the question that I have is how do you change it out if there are no buildings there to put it in and do that? I don't know if any of us know the answer.
Well, yeah, I think Chuck could answer that, or perhaps Mr. Noy.
Actually, I don't want to diverge too far here, but a year or so ago, let me just say a year or so ago, when new Rego 654 is Rev 1 is being evaluated for EP, that was for operating plants. I recall that the NRC was also starting to look into EP for decommissioning plants that would touch upon size of EPZ, on all this stuff. I don't recall seeing anything come out from the regulatory or legal standpoint yet on that. It's going to happen. It's just, if, in terms of any changes that, aside from what we're seeing right now, in terms of best, if you want to call it best practice. So, again, I haven't seen anything since a year or so ago, but it's certainly on the table from NRC's standpoint. And there's lawsuits out there. We're watching Vermont Yankee in terms of what's happening right now with decommissioning funds being used for other than decommissioning plant in terms of fuel management. That's being debated now. So I think that there's a minefield out there, and let's continue observing and following. Then,
Right, there's plenty of information,
So,
there are plenty
but
of
we're not-
aspects to be debated, and
this could be the subject of a whole meeting, but I don't want to diverge any further. But it's important information. Thanks, Rich.
It's just an item in our report, our top 5 report is issue number 2. So when we get to that,
Yeah, we'll be
we'll be dealing
Yeah.
with it, okay?
Thanks, Rich, for that. Okay, why don't we move to plant status update from Dave? I realize the agenda came out before last week, so they want to tie in some of the things here with that too.
Just before I get started, I want to thank you for your heartfelt recognition of the human side of the plant. Too often we think about it as concrete and steel and fuel, and it really is 633 dedicated and hardworking people. So I really appreciate that on the part of the company and all of us. Since the last meeting on October 5th, the plant made a 10 CFR 5072 event notification that was due to discovery that the 10 CFR 50 Appendix R hot shorts had not been appropriately characterized when the condition was identified in 2012. So that required a report to the NRC. They are compensated for via fire watches now while we make modifications to the facility. The areas in question are areas that are surveilled at least every 4 hours by security personnel, and at least every shift by operations personnel. They are activities where maintenance is conducted on a regular basis. So we're confident from a risk standpoint that there was adequate monitoring in those areas for the potential for fire that could result in a hot short that under certain postulated conditions could result in the valves not performing as expected during the fire. On October 7th, at about 3 p.m., plant reduced power to 95%. That was unexpected and in response to an indicated condition of high level in one of the plant's feed water heaters. We did some troubleshooting and assessment, determined that it was a false indication of high level on the heater due to a vacuum leak on the reference leg for the instruments for the heater. We backfilled that reference leg and corrected the leakage and restored 100% power on October 8th at 7 p.m. As you guys have talked about, on October 13th, it was announced to the station that the Entergy had made the decision not to operate the plant beyond 2019, and that the plant would close on that date or sometime prior to that date, being May of 2019. Two primary drivers were the low wholesale energy cost as a result of low cost natural gas, and a market structure that essentially is not favorable to recognizing the benefits of nuclear power as a clean energy source. Some of the specific examples were the winter reliability credits that were made available through FERC to natural gas power plants that maintained a supply of oil on site, so that when natural gas supplies were low, they could then burn oil to be able to continue to provide electricity, while baseload nuclear plants were specifically exempted from the legislation and being able to take advantage of it. So that is where we are as a site. Part of the announcement did include the station's commitment to go forward with the regulatory recovery. Commencing, actually started the steps already, but Entergy has committed $45 to $60 million that will be necessary to execute the regulatory recovery and to restore the plant to normal regulatory oversight. And that was it for the plan report, pending any questions.
Thanks, Dave.
Commission ask a question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have some, I have some, but certainly feel free to.
I know Mr. Berger and I are going to agree on this. Massachusetts has been deregulated as electricity in 1997. It was in that order, because Pilgrim was sold in 99. And people outside of here, lay people, ask me the question, in a deregulated market, how do we subsidize like solar and wind and still say it's a deregulated market? I don't even know how they're subsidized, but I do know, I see a lot of people with, the arrays on top of the house, and they don't have to pay for it. So it's almost like, is money changing hands? How is that structured?
Well, I know that federal subsidies for solar power have been on the order of about $5 billion to produce what is roughly nationally, I think, about 3 to 4% of the national energy that's being generated by solar. So it's a significant amount of subsidy, both in the credits that are provided to individuals that do solar manufacture. I believe there are energy credits that are provided to people that use solar residentially, where they can essentially provide power back to the grid or be paid as if they were providing power back to the grid at a retail rate. So they save in a way on their electric bills that is more indicative of the retail rate vice the wholesale rate for power production.
On the thing where you say that it doesn't cost them anything to put it on the roof, that's not really true. You get the power at a reduced rate over a 20-year period. You do sign a contract for 20 years. They will install the panels on your roof, okay, and then and they get, it's the company like Solar City, or also there's a Solar Run. There's about 4 or 5 of them out there that are operating in the area, and they'll put them on the roof. They offer you free maintenance. They insure it, so that if a tree falls on your house or a limb falls in there and destroys the panel, they replace them free of charge. But you're paying, in one case, I think when I looked at it, I was paying about 19 cents per kilowatt to now Eversource. It would cost me, with them, they had about 4 different programs. I could go down to like 12 cents per kilowatt and it will escalate 2% every year for 20 years. or I can pay 15 cents per kilowatt with no escalator, or I could pay 20 grand and just buy a unit. Now, you still, they put in a meter that is a zero net metering. And during the day, when you're exporting energy, it winds backwards. And at night, when you're using it, it winds forward. And that affects the price per kilowatt. But there's a delivery charge that never goes away. And that's about half the charge that Eversource charges you.
So de facto, we're all paying for it.
Pardon?
The subsidy is that all of us, through our taxes, go to these grants.
Go to the grants, and so we're all we're subsidizing it one way or another.
Sorry.
No, it's interesting.
Anyone? Richard?
Dave, do you have any specific references that would allow me to determine the nature of security that the plant would implement or deconstruct or whatever as a result of save, store, and decon? Either one. I've gone through NRC today on a search, and it's not in the general stuff at all about the decommissioning. Do you have a reference for that? 10 CFR 7355 applies now, will apply until you dismantle, right?
That's right.
So I'm curious as to how, you know, if you're gonna lose your capital funding and, you know, a certain amount of funding and so forth, where security fits in.
Well, as long as the plant continues to operate, security posture, security staffing remains the same. As far as what happens to the plan once the plant ceases to operate, the only information I think I may know about would be Vermont Yankees plan. There may be elements of that plan that are available publicly, and I'll take a look to see if I can.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's
There are, VY posts all their information on its website.
VY Vermont Yankee, yeah?
Yeah, I think if you just Google VY, it's the only site that
Yeah.
comes up now, and they have a whole decommissioning site with a lot of public documentation, so that may be a good starting point
Okay.
as a reference.
Number two is, do you mind, Rich?
No.
The cybersecurity plan that you have to deliver to the NRC in 2016, is that still on the books?
Yeah, I believe that all the plants in the industry have deferred that submittal until 2017.
17.
But it still is. We will still continue to meet all the NRC requirements for meeting that commitment for the cybersecurity plan by 2017.
Anyone else on the committee? David,
Thanks, David.
Chuck?
Yeah, what are the factors that will make Entergy decide to terminate operation in 2017 versus 2019?
It's really as simple as being able to provide or fulfill the contracts that Entergy is committed for to provide the energy to the grid between 2017 and 2019 at an affordable price. So really, it's the ability to be able to identify within this market replacement energy that can be bought in order to be able to decommission the plant sooner. So, you know, right now the area is constrained by natural gas capacity, just doesn't have the ability to be able to bring in additional gas and additional pipelines. Transmission is constrained, that's why we're subsidizing additional transmission for Canadian jobs to provide additional hydroelectric power. So it's, I believe it's unlikely that we'll be able to find a source of power other than Pilgrim to fulfill those commitments, but it does hinge on the being able to meet those commitments between 2017 and 2019.
Jim?
Have you gotten a reaction from ISO yet regarding the announcement, and what is it?
I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, I still put out a pretty long statement that I can send to the chairman if you'd like to see it. It's pretty
Have you
lengthy.
read it? Can you just say what the gist of it was?
It's pretty long, but you know what, I'd rather just send it so I'm not saying anything
I've been having trouble getting attachments
Yeah.
for some reason, so if you can send it to Paul or Chuck, then maybe they can forward it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or Paul, actually,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, if you can
I
send it
just
to
don't wanna
Paul.
misconstrue the ISO's
Yeah.
words.
Yeah, if you can send it to
I don't-
Paul, then Paul distribute it.
I know ISO tried to talk another plant that was going out of service into staying on the grid, because they
At
needed,
the Board of Selectmen, meeting, they talked about
yeah,
trying to entice Breaking Point to continue to operate and Breaking, turn them down.
turned them down.
Right.
And I would imagine that if they did that with Breaking Point, they're certainly going to be doing that with you guys.
I'm not aware of, any,
I'll
discussion
find it right now.
with ICE.
I have one more, Rich.
Yeah, well, actually, Jeff, then.
Go ahead, you go.
Okay, Rich, go ahead.
Assuming, let's say in 2017, you decide instead of refueling that you'll cease operations,
Yes,
you will have to take the fuel rods that are existing, cores, whatever it is.
in the,
put them in
or the 580 fuel assemblies.
Yeah, you'll have to put them in the pool.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. Now, if you go to 2019, you're gonna have, I'm looking for, what is that entity's commitment for, FSI? What's up, you're committed to putting in the fuel rods in 2017 and 2019 into the dry cask, storage, is that correct?
We would need to continue to put those fuel assemblies in there to be able to accommodate the full
I
core
understand.
offload.
But if you don't do a refueling,
Yes, we still need to make the room in the pool to be able to handle the 580 fuel assemblies.
so my
I mean,
question
what's-
is, if you go to Safe Store, that should be the end of your commitment on the ISFSI?
I'm not sure I.
If you go to
understand the
Safe
question.
Store,
Yes,
beyond 2017,
yes.
you'll be taking
Could
the
could
fuel,
we, is,
you're gonna have to take the fuel rods out of the pool in order to accommodate the rods coming out of the reactor.
that's correct. Yeah, those casks will have to be loaded to be able to allow the fuel that comes out of the reactor to then go into the spent fuel pool, decay for 5 years, at which time that fuel could then be put into dry cask storage.
Right, so my question is, if it's 2017, there's gonna be spent fuel, dry cask to accommodate the rods coming out of the pool in 2017.
That's
If it
correct.
goes to 2019, there's gonna be cask necessary to be able to put the rods in the pool and take them out and put them in the cask. And that's the end of your commitment if you go to Safe Store.
I'm still not understanding it.
I think, if I can jump in here, they have the capability to offload the complete core into the fuel pool.
Yeah, but if you go to
at all
Safe
times.
Store, they won't do that, right?
Oh,
Yes, they
no,
will.
they will,
They
if
will?
they decide to shut down, whenever they shut
I
down,
misunderstood.
they will offload the whole core and put it into the spent fuel.
Yes, Safe Store offloads the fuel from the reactor vessel and just maintains.
Understood the
fuel
reactor
pools.
vessel, but I'm talking about the spent fuel pool.
All right, the fuel that is in the spent fuel pool as an economic decision, what most plants do is then move all that fuel after it has decayed for 5 years into dry cask storage. Because at that time, the systems don't need to be maintained in order to be able to keep the spent fuel pool water clean and cool.
Regardless if you go decon or.
That's
That's
correct.
okay, that's different from what I understood.
Everybody got this, right?
Rich,
Susie,
You probably all know the answers, so bear with me.
that's,
When you answered one question, because it was, in my mind, why would they just convert that plant to a gas facility? Your transmission lines are all in operation, you know, you get the cooling and stuff like that, but if you say it's a
I
natural
like
gas.
this electric.
it's music to Paul's ears.
If you have a natural gas shortage, that totally rules that out.
Right, I
You have a
believe it.
delivery problem.
That's right, yeah. Any new gas capacity is gonna require additional pipeline into the area in order to accommodate.
All right, now, when you mention spent fuel, I was always under the impression it was a 10-year decay. It's only a 5-year
5 years.
decay.
5-year decay under the current cask systems, the casks that are designed.
What do you have existing in the pool right now? Not necessarily number of bundles, but I've heard 970 tons, is that correct?
I'm not sure of the weight. There are about 3,200 assemblies. I can tell you exactly how many there are. There are 3,162 assemblies in this thing.
So whatever day you actually cease operations, at the very minimum, you're looking at 5 years worth of dry casting because you've got stuff that has to decay for 5 years.
That's
before you can
correct.
even move it.
That's right.
So 2017 could become 2022, 2019 could become 2024.
That's correct.
That's right.
And how much have you dry cast to this point?
3 casks with 68 fuel assemblies per cask, so 204 fuel assemblies.
68.
That's right.
And we move 580 when we refuel.
That's correct, yeah. Well, when we offload the core, when we do a typical refueling, it's only a third of the fuel assemblies in the core, but a full core offload is 580 assemblies.
So if I heard you correctly, Energy is committed financially to take those fuel rods that are in the spent fuel pool and put them into canisters.
That's correct.
All,
Rich, are you wondering about, is your question really over what period of time, or?
well, certainly over what period of time.
Yeah, I mean, is that?
Yeah,
According to Dave, it's gonna be progressive.
yeah, and at that point, it's economic. It's a matter of being able to, even with the cost of putting it into the canisters,
Right.
the cost to maintain the spent fuel pool and its systems and the diesels that are required to be able to support the spent fuel pool. It's far more economic to actually put the fuel into canisters.
So essentially, that's the same as what the other plants have done
So
too.
that is correct. There's a lot of lessons to be learned
Right.
from the other plants. Is there a natural flow to
Well,
this?
That's the way Vermont is moving
Yeah.
forward,
What are they-
Kewanee,
And-
San Onofre.
And, you know, you can tax it or you can do whatever you want to it, but.
But I misunderstood saying
Okay.
But to follow the flow of the money, follow the fuel, okay, it's gonna go into dry gas as soon as possible.
Before Jim asks his next question, let me just add to what I'm hearing. I think in reviewing the Maine Yankee decommissioning advisory committee report from 10 years ago, one of the things they were struggling with back then when they thought there was going to be Yucca Mountain is how much goes into dry cask over what period of time there. And fast forwarding, there's a situation now that we're all aware of that the state of New Mexico is welcoming with open arms an interim ISC. I believe the NRC was not objecting to that. They made, I don't know if they issued any temporary or permanent licenses for something to be built, assuming the economics are there. But should that come to bear and the NRC tweaks its regulations, whether Yucca Mountain happens in our lifetime or not, or some other Yucca, that it's possible that spent nuclear fuel from shut down nuclear power plants that have not been decommissioned, where like Maine Yankee, you just have everything on the pad, but still have the spent fuel pool. If I'm Entergy or any other facility owned and operated from a business standpoint, I'm going to be taking a very close look at all this, because I'm going to say, you know what? It costs money to buy casks. It costs money to get out there. It's going to cost money if the state, or even our suggestion from the Revenue Idea Task Force about taxing casks out on the pad, were to come to bear there. If I were Entergy, I'd say, you know what? I'll put out what I need to put out, but geez, in 5 years, or maybe even 10 years, there's another interim place and we can offload. It's better to keep the stuff in the pool there, not have to have it put into cask out there, go back in it there, to put in a transport cask. Yeah, that's money. I mean, I don't know what the dollars are for all that, but just from a qualitative standpoint, it would seem to me be easier not to be in such a hurry too.
So
that's
the
just-
money is gonna come from O&M,
That's right.
not decommissioning.
That's correct. Yeah, the money cannot come.
Right.
The money for spent fuel pool, spent fuel storage cannot come from.
Although Vermont right now, that's being debated up with Vermont Yankee because last month you may recall that Bill Dean, NRC higher up, was making a statement to that effect that it cannot be used for other purposes, but then in another report or article we had, it was suggested that NRC was also allowing certain licensees to use their decon funds for some of the expenses of a shutdown plant, including it. So I think this is being debated actively right now within NRC. I asked Ray McKinley, I sent him an email, I forwarded all this to him last month. He has not gotten back to me. It's so much of a hot potato while they're debating this internally right now. I think to be continued there. Jim, you had a question?
Yeah. As I recall, when you were before us at the committee, the zoning board, okay, that the pad that was built wasn't big enough to contain all the gas required to empty the state fuel pool.
That's a true statement. The cask pad can hold 40 casks, which is not enough to be able to hold all the fuel that is currently in the pool.
So you'll have to build another pad.
We will have to build another pad.
Well, how many pads will you need?
Yeah, I don't think it's much more than the capacity of the 40 casks. I haven't done a specific math, but I don't think it's a lot more. I think we're probably looking on the order of like 10 to 15 additional casks.
So, Mr. Chair, can I just jump in?
Sure.
For a quick second? I just want to add a caveat that a lot of this discussion about decommissioning is pretty premature. We're not there yet, and the company doesn't have a plan yet, and we don't even have an end date yet. So I understand the need for questions and for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke with Dave, and we have some folks who are willing to come do a presentation on decommissioning generally. You know, we may not have specifics regarding Pilgrim, but it might be worth it to the committee. And I think after the new year might be good. I think after the new year would be good for them, and maybe we can look.
David, in the past, along those lines, we've had Entergy come in here to do certain presentations, and then we nudge Melissa, hey, this would be good for, and then it's gone to the Board of Selectmen. But rather than just coming here first, if that's something you think the board would be interested in,
I'll pass that on.
we'll nip it in the bud and save everyone some time there. I realize a lot of this is conceptual
Yeah, it's just
thinking
not for
right
us to
now.
answer.
Nope, that's not I understand and not a problem there. Obviously, this will be a topic of discussion, I'm sure, for quite some time at our meetings as time progresses and more information. Jeff, you had?
I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure who these are directed to. Whoever feels qualified to answer can certainly do that. They come at this from another direction, and that is the direction that Governor Baker's been talking about, which is his, I think, overarching concern that the Commonwealth have enough energy to be able to supply its needs. Two questions. The first one is, it's been mentioned that in order to have, for example, a gas-fired plant, if we wanted one, we would need pipelines. I'm just asking, and again, I don't know who can answer this. The theoretical question: is it possible to have LNG tankers come to a tanker terminus in Massachusetts Bay, which would feed the plant? As opposed to
there is an existing.
Chelsea.
I'm sorry?
I would say you talk to the good people of Chelsea.
Well, no, there's already a tanker facility
That's right.
out off of Salem
That's right.
Harbor.
Yeah.
And they just expanded the capacity of that a few years ago, and it supplies storage tanks that were able to feed the Salem Harbor plant. They're building a brand new combined cycle plant at Salem Harbor. As best I can tell from just looking at the construction, they're not using any of the old Salem Harbor plant, not the turbine generator or anything. It's a site that's, separated where they're clearly building the construction. And they're also working on an additional gas pipeline that will take advantage of that offshore port that the terminus there to bring the gas ashore.
Chuck, but a lot of that gas supply and that means be more for business and residential uses and heating as opposed to baseload power
I
plants.
don't know the answer to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't either, but then you start getting into issues about, the gas pipeline, assuming it's built there. For some reason, the
I
tanker
don't know
couldn't.
whether there's any communication between the gas pipeline systems that feed residential and commercial needs versus power plant needs. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've read up on all that kind of stuff, but I would think that if there's different end uses there and end supply types there, just a hypothetical, if there was some problem in the Middle East there in terms of tankers coming in or whatever to supply offloading off Newfoundland or Maine
It won't
to go.
Yeah.
I'm just saying hypothetically versus having a pipeline already built, a new pipeline, where you might have more assurance of the gas getting there unless there's a Hurricane Sandy and it breached the pipelines coming up through New Jersey or whatever near the coast. There's all these.
Well,
I don't know either. I don't want to diverge.
If you want to use LNG, that's going to come possibly from new LNG facilities being built here in the United States, or where it's coming from now.
It's
From it's going to be a lot more expensive than the cheap natural gas we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be substantially more expensive.
Okay, so that was my first question. The second one is, I don't know how familiar you are with high temperature superconducting, but what high temperature superconducting enables is the importation. I'm not going to explain what high temperature superconducting is. People can look it up, but it's becoming almost on a par with copper. And the advantage of HTS is that it enables transmission of power over very long distances. For example, from the Yukon down to New England, with virtually no loss.
High temperature or low
high
temperature?
I believe it's HTS.
So
It's still,
I know you
it's
can
still,
get
yeah, it is still very low. It's called high temperature superconducting, but it actually, the actual temperature is very low.
I think Jack Alexander years ago was talking about losses of old lines, their heat loss.
Yeah.
Their heat,
I thought you had to be down near absolute zero on the Kelvin scale to
be a superconductor.
To be a
I think what
superconductor.
Mrs. Jeff's talking about is there is a level above
Yeah.
that. It's not.
It's
0
HTS.
degrees. But
Mhm.
we have DC transmission now that's virtually lossless.
So the question was, do you know if there's any consideration, this is why I said that no one could answer these, if there's any consideration being given to incorporating that as a method to get more power to move?
I don't know.
They don't have to. We all heard that ISO New England presentation. They just have to tear out northern Vermont or come down through Maine, okay, with existing right of ways. It's just the money to invest.
Yeah.
But de facto, what you're doing is outsourcing jobs.
I think Heather,
And
Heather
Heather has a
had a
question.
question, and I'm gonna ask my two questions, then we're gonna move on.
I have a question for you, Lou. I know you said that Entergy was committed to moving all the dry gas storage, and I don't know if I missed it, I'm not making you repeat yourself, but do you have a time frame when that,
No, there's no specific time frame.
so it could be 60 years from now?
Well,
theoretically?
the company is looking at all options. What Bill Moll, the president of Entergy Wholesale Commodities, said in his press conference was that he doesn't expect the decommissioning of Pilgrim to take 60 years. He expects it to take far less than 60 years. So, but they're evaluating several different business models and options, so there's no firm plan right now.
Heather, I think Vermont Yankee, from what I had read, that they're planning on moving everything to dry cask within the next, with a 5-year cooling, certainly expediently, at least get it all on the pad from the spent fuel of Vermont, not to keep it in the spent fuel pool. That was my understanding.
Yeah, I wanted to follow on with what Dave Malaguti said. whether or not the plant could be converted to a gas plant. And I think I addressed that question once before, either to one of you two or Jack Alexander, and I thought the response was, no, you couldn't.
They'd have to build a new unit.
What about the?
But it could be right, well, but the other, in fairness to Jim, we have to, you know, you already have the canal site, and the canal site has an interest in replacing Pilgrim. And you have Brockton, the Brockton site, these places are already permitted, okay, so they've got kind of a leg up on Plymouth to do this. But that's not to suggest they might not have problems, but the owner of the land, if this time is Mr. Dave.
Yeah.
I didn't think they produced as much power as Pilgrim.
No, they'd have to put 2 new units in, but they'd be dual cycle, probably come in on 40.
Yeah, I know a guy that works at the Brockton plant, and he says their gas turbine is just too much of a problem.
Not to suggest nuclear is safer and more dependable.
Jim, just to close your thought, at least from the UMass, the first UMass report, it concluded that in terms of that particular current energy program site there, that it probably wouldn't make any sense for any other businesses to come in there that weren't defined. If that's the case, unless there's some other business that everybody's unaware of, including UMass, then it would seem logical that it's an industrial site there, so power, something else, whatever there, as opposed to, you know, office buildings or residential or anything. But, John,
I don't want you to lose your 2 questions.
that's okay.
Just for my own edification. You've got a generator, you've got a turbine. Right now, the steam from the reactor feeds the turbine that's in the generator. Okay, take the reactor part out of it, put up a new building with a boiler, if you could get gas, and pipe that steam over to turn that same turbine. Is that overly simplistic? Of course it is.
Dave, actually, that's what I was involved with Morant Canal back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I was retained by the Cape Cod Commission. They were planning, they call it, it's a fossil, it's not a nuclear fossil, it was a fossil, but they call that repowering, using the turbine generator set and taking out the old boilers and they were going to put in 4 new combined cycle combustion turbines in there. They shelved the project halfway through because of economics and other considerations, but that's certainly that. Now, they may have to build a new switch yard associated with given it, but yeah, you still got.
The short answer, Dave, no, it's not possible.
I know, it's a shame. From someone who has very little construction knowledge compared to what you have here before you, I deal with how you guys do much bigger projects, but you know, you have all this infrastructure, you have all these transmission lines going from the central hub. It just seems a sin to waste it.
Dave, you're welcome to come to more of our meetings. And we'll be, you know, by the end of the year there, everyone in the select board there is going to look at you like the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just one other thing, before we get too enamored with the idea of LNG, I don't know whether it's changed, Mr. Grassi, but I know back at 9/11 days, the 2 most appealing targets for terrorists were domestic water supplies and liquefied natural gas tankers. Those were the 2 most exposed targets to a large-scale terrorist
That's why you
attack.
see such a massive security when the LNG tanker comes in right now, that whoever adjusts it. There's been a number of risk assessments done on it. They're very vulnerable. They're building an LNG plant down in the Gulf right now, down in the Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas area. But LNG is essentially good because we're competing with Qatar on LNG because they have such tremendous gas fields up between Iran and Qatar. They're going to take those LNGs and send them over to compete with the Middle East people over in China, Taiwan, and all that. And our prices are going to increase. And we're going to wish we had their plant.
Let's get back to the liquefaction
Yes.
plant. Over 2 years ago, they had already permitted between Canada and the United States the construction of 15 LNG facilities, and there were another 10 that were already submitted for review and approval. So there could be, and a couple are under construction right now.
If they use double hull tankers, things would be a lot less vulnerable. But they don't necessarily do that, although the LNGs now are constructed very, very security conscious from the outside.
Okay, my turn.
Did I have one last point?
You're the vice chair, always gets one last.
And that was
point.
just to point out to the good Mr. Malaguti that you could see by the good exchange of information between Ms. Heather and Mr. Dave. I mean, there you have the future ahead of us, okay, where both parties are saying the same thing. It's perhaps in the best economic interest of Entergy to dry cask storage, and it would be, Ms. Heather, I can't speak for you, but you'd like to have all the fuel in dry casks as expeditiously as possible.
Right, but Dave didn't say that that Entergy was going to be doing expedited fuels transfer to dry cask. He said that it
He
would
didn't
be
say he wasn't
empty.
either.
Right,
No,
there's
he
no
didn't.
plan yet.
Right.
Right.
So I'm not being
No.
argumentative, I'm just
No.
saying.
But there was a reason, and that's, I don't know what it is, but there was a reason for them wanting to do it, I think expeditiously up at Vermont Yankee.
But- Right.
So,
And that's the same would hold true here. And that's all that I was saying. Instead of 3 casks a year, it would be at a far greater rate, no matter when it started, 2017 and 19. And you'd agree it'd be a far greater rate.
That's
okay.
One more thing.
You're the
And
boss.
I'm not being-
Dave, we work for you.
And I'm not
So-
beating, I'm not beating a dead horse, but when you look at this from the NRC, it says, decommissioning estimated to be finished for Vermont Yankee by 2073. So that's a long time in the future. That sounds expeditious.
Well,
But the
they can
fuel's
put,
out in 5
they
years.
can put everything into dry cask, but they still have to have enough funds to just clean up, irradiate, dismantle, dispose, restore. So,
It is important to recognize that based on the NRC's report that came out at the end of September, there are only 3 plants in the United States that have more money in their decommissioning funds than Pilgrim. So it's projected that the Pilgrim Decommissioning Fund will be worth $1.27 billion in 2032, which by any measure is sufficient to be able to support decommissioning.
my question, I still had on the agenda Pilgrim Tour for newest NMC members, and I know Joe's not here. Was Entergy still gonna be able to do
Yes,
the tour for Heather?
absolutely.
And Lauren's not here, I think Heather, I think you emailed me, that you and Joe hadn't heard back from Lauren, so.
I'll have her reach out to you.
Okay,
I
so-
know. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but at some point along the way, I think it'd be good for you. And when you do have that tour, let me know, Heather, at least someone let me know, because I think I might want to be on it myself again, just to be there. Okay, the other question I had, Dave, is in reading the press release and everything else over the weekend, and getting caught up with things, that if Entergy Corporate decides that the reactor would not get refueled in 2017, the September 1st NRC letter to Mr. Dent is still out there in terms of where they're going to be, NRC is going to be coming in, maybe staying in the coming months, if they haven't started already, doing more intensive inspections of the plant. And is it conceivable that if NRC were to suddenly find something that they didn't like that was safety related, and be too, whether it's a component or equipment or what have you, I'm not talking about a procedure or a report not being filed or whatever, or something, but something that was very serious there, they said to Entergy, well, geez, going back to the September 1st letter, that they could order a shutdown unless that was taken care of. And if it wasn't a case like a shutdown for a day or a week, or if it could be a couple months, are there scenarios like that could enter into the picture where Entergy, I know I'm speculating here, but where Entergy Corp would say, no, we just can't wait till 2017 now. Because that, That's not likely to happen, but
I'm sure there are scenarios, a shutdown order could be a possibility as a result of the inspection. And there are probably a number of scenarios that would lead to not taking action to restart the plant. But they have to be weighed against the cost of addressing whatever the issue is.
or if NRC came out with a new order post Fukushima that applied to all BWR facilities, Mark 1 containments, that just saying, okay, based on Fukushima, here's what we're going to require all licensees to do, and you got to start doing this, that, that's always been,
It's part of
It's all part
continually
of it.
evaluating the business case of continuing to operate the plant.
Hey, Jeff, one more question.
Mr. Mole had said at the press conference that the plant was going to spend, I believe the figure was 40 to 60 million.
Yes, that's
On
correct.
correcting the issues that NRC already identified.
That's good.
What is the time frame for that?
The timeframe is we've already commenced, so it's a matter of going through a phase of assessment, evaluation, and then correction. So probably on the order of 9 to 12 months.
Okay, we're going to move on to new business. And I just want to spend a quick moment on the first bullet there, which we started to talk about last month, where NRC had canceled its
NHS.
National Academy of Science Cancer Risk Pilot Study. And it started as a simple inquiry of mine earlier in September to further fact find for our committee why the NRC decided to cancel that study for routine licensed nuclear power plant emissions at this time evolved into an interesting exchange of scientific and health effects information that most of us were not intimately, technically, and professionally knowledgeable or familiar with. But in any event, the rate of emails has slowed down. It's stopped, thankfully. It's getting pretty intense there. I think, one take I have on that is that some of the concerns and issues seem to be focusing too on cancer health effects, perceived cancer health effects following nuclear plant radiological accidents like Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. Mary's not here tonight. I know she was focusing a lot of her concerns on when BECO in the early 80s. There was a alleged sudden, I don't want to call it accidental, it may have been a malfunction, it may have been an O&M problem, but I guess BECO, as she calls it, blew their filters, and there was a larger than normal radiological release to the environment, supposedly. And then information she provided me, a study done by Dr. Clapp, was saying the meteorology was not favorable for dispersion, and ergo, they put it all together, and there was increased cancer incidence, and MDPH did cancer risk, Southeast Mass Cancer Health Study in 1990, and so forth and so on there. And bringing it up to the present, I think, Paul, last month you circulated, you did. You circulated NRC's response to a 2.202 petition from somewhere else there, where the I don't want to use the word plaintiffs, but the petitioners were claiming that you should not stop the cancer risk study for routine releases, because how do we know the plant isn't burping on occasion, even for routine operations there? So I passed the question on to Paul. I says, Paul, I've been heavily involved in my career with continuous emissions monitoring of fossil fuel plant emissions and waste energy emissions and real field monitoring. I haven't been involved with monitoring continuous emission monitoring of nuclear power plant emissions. Paul put together a very useful short write-up. I didn't circulate it yet. I just wanted, Paul, maybe you could briefly summarize that, but circulate it to the committee after the meeting where you, but in a nutshell, you were explaining how the plant, it's always having CEM at all times there, so it's not like something could be snuck out of the vents there, even during, at least that was the gist I got out of it.
It was my intention, okay, just to explain my history with instrumentation and controls, having sat in that back in 1970. But it is really no different than like Jeff or yourself would monitor for arsenics or heavy metals coming out of the canal plant or out of the blocking plant. Okay, you have to have a representative sample, and usually they use an isokinetic type probe. And what you would do is you would monitor your release points. So liquid releases are easy because they're always in a tank and they're batch released. But the reactor building vent or the main stack, which take a section while all the buildings remain at a negative compared to the atmosphere, so all leakage is in. So that means that everything that's in the building for an atmosphere then has to go out those designated points. And that, Chuck, correct me at any time or elaborate at any time. So you monitor your effluent points, and that's done with isokinetic probes that take a representative sample of the gas flow. There's also grab samples that are taken to independently check the isokinetic probe's accuracy. What they look at is, and Heather must be similar in the medical industry, right? Where there is nuclear medicine, there's leftover nuclear medicines. I mean,
Not really involved.
okay.
I mean,
So-
Well, what's done is you take a representative sample, you put a probe in that, always put two probes in with separate chambers, okay? You monitor electronically with pressure switches the flow and the pressures at points in the sampling system. So you've got duplicates of everything. You've constantly monitored 24/7 for any change in the system. And then you calibrate your detectors. They enjoy a sodium iodide with a touch of thallium. So what they do is they're excited by electrons, okay, and they emit light, and then that light is multiplied. It's a very simple detection scheme, but you put in different level sources on your initial calibration so that you can measure anything that is giving off radioactivity. Okay. And what you do is you determine your sample chamber's geometry, the efficiency of the detector, you prove its capability of not being overwhelmed, likewise you prove its capability of detecting at a low level. And then you keep taking grab samples to verify that what you're reading on your indication 24/7 is conservative, not even accurate, but conservative to accurate. And that's what you base your effluent reports on, and you do the same with arsenic.
One thing I know from my stack sampling experience is that you can't always measure certain things because it can't be detected with this type of equipment because the levels are too low, or you don't need to test for everything because you can use a surrogate. If you're emitting this, that means something else would be emitted in parallel with that. If you're not emitting something that's easier to measure, then you're not going to be emitting something else here.
And
alluding to that, so I know sometimes some of the public interest groups have been concerned about how are you monitoring for this, are you monitoring for that there, but that's something that comes into play there too.
So what you would do with your grab samples is you would determine your isotopic mix in your off-gas effluent. You would recognize that a certain reading on the detector, which is calibrated for anything over 50 keV, okay, is indicative of the grab sample I've got. Okay, it's mostly iodine. It's got a touch of cesium, and that's one way you know that the chambers are working. Okay, and it might also have some kryptons. Okay, so it's basically your noble gases, okay, and it's probably got some tritium. But how you know that is with your grab sample, you take it to a gamma spectrum analyzer where you can count the individual peaks on it, and you can see so much of it is a contribution to this or that different isotope.
Yeah, I think in fairness to the petitioners though, and I can understand where Mary was coming from with her concern too. They're really concerned more about epidemiology, health effects over long-term periods. Just to show the leg bone connected to the thigh bone, the real-time monitoring we were talking about before could be used for that, but at least at the time, our objective was to get something extended out beyond the property line for EP purposes in the unlikely event of an accident there. Certainly that information can be used to support those kinds of studies too, but that's where the air quality modeling comes in. If you're getting reliable stacker vent emissions here, that's what goes into the models too. Models aren't that perfect, but at least it's a belt and suspenders there for that purpose.
And the idea is technical specifications, the regulations by the NRC, by the federal government says you can't be detectable beyond the fence boundary of the plant. And to look at it, you take somebody like Mr. Noyes, you probably get 1,000 times more a year radiation than you do. And of the 800 people that work there and have worked there for 40 years, how can you account that there is no statistical aberration amongst them?
Paul, can you circulate your email you sent to me to the committee talking about that? It's from about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. David?
Somewhere in the archives of my memory, I recall a release, and I believe it was a Taurus vent problem. Does that sound familiar?
I think the one I was describing before, it wasn't that, it was the off-gas system, but that would be a different.
I thought it was, I recall exactly what you're saying, it was a source event problem.
Yeah.
I don't know of any time that activity has been vented from the direct Taurus vent.
No,
This was
no, and I
accidental.
don't think these
was
gentlemen might
accidental,
be
as I
talking
recall.
pre-K. Okay,
Somehow 87
Yeah.
comes to mind, somewhere around there.
Somewhere in that area.
There was an off-gas filter in the stack that.
Right, yeah, but that wouldn't be a tourist route.
No, but it might have been while we were
Caused
drawing
something
on the
come.
tourist to draw the tourist down.
I mean,
So the source wasn't the tourist, the source of the contamination was the filter. But the
Paul, you may recall during the Pilgrim relicensing, when the severe accident mitigation analyses were being done by Entergy, there was a debate of the interveners about cost benefit of additional filters being put into the off-gas system so that, I think NRC concluded at the time, at least there wasn't a cost benefit, but then there was a special NRC staff study on that to look into that further about 4 or 5 years ago. And I think the commissioners at that time, even though the staff said there could be some useful benefit there, the commissioners at the time said, nah, we don't think so, we're not going to require that, even if it's used in Europe. So, I mean, that's the last thing I heard about all that. But anyways, let's move on.
Well, and those things are fought over at very high levels, as you must have a meteorologist, and Mr. Malaguti, I don't know, as a layman, I would look at it and say, would a filter have helped at Fukushima? And the answer would be no. So you'd say, why would you insist on it?
Okay, I want to move on to the next bullet. Today I received a copy of the UMass Phase 2 work scope contract. I got it from Lee Hartman, who I saw on Saturday at town meeting, and there was a slight revision to whatever may have been received before, if it was received before, by your town official decision from last Tuesday. So it's kind of hot off the press here. I show of hand, did anyone have a chance to look at this yet? I just had a chance to quickly skim through.
I
Heather,
just skimmed it.
Rich, okay. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time. I just want to point out a couple things, and then I have a question or comment also to throw out to the table, and also for David's consideration. Not that you're going to have an answer yet, Dave, for our committee, but it sort of ties it together. The project, this study is a
35 million.
35 million. Apparently UMass got a 10,000 grant. It would have been 45,000, so it's 35,000. And the study is supposed to be completed by next March. The purpose of the study in this next phase, and I believe some of our town officials that met with UMass, I guess about 2 months ago. We were not at that meeting. We were asked them to sit in, so we found out about this after the fact. But apparently the consensus at that time was for UMass to provide Plymouth and the region with an increased understanding of best practices for decommissioning advisory panels, to identify strategies for coordinating local, regional, and legislative approaches to the public engagement with such panels, and to recommend actions over the next 6 months following the October decision to permanently post Pilgrim by 2019. And there's about, looks like 5 tests here. The project calls for a structural assessment of the origins, objectives, and achievements and levels of public engagement for previous and ongoing decommissioning advisory panels, focusing on merchant plant scenarios. There's 5 tasks: creating an inventory of decommissioning advisory panels to identify common characteristics, research legislative activity pertaining to this topic, conduct interviews with panel members, past and present, to gain insights, assemble a comparative review of decommissioning advisory panels to determine value of citizen participation, and providing recommendations and analysis to guide participation in and expectation for future decommissioning advisory panels. This is being done on behalf of the town of Plymouth, and I guess some of the surrounding towns are involved here with I forget which group, same as the phase 1 study there. But this is not being done for the state. This is being done for the immediate region here. And just want to back up a moment here. Back 2 years ago, I think I mentioned a little earlier that we got a copy of the Maine Decommissioning Citizen Advisory Committee report, and one of the recommendations there, an important one, is a short paragraph. If permanent shutdown is a planned evolution, pre-shutdown activities should begin in earnest approximately a year before shutdown with a dedicated team of site and corporate individuals with expertise in licensing, stakeholder interaction, engineering, project management, financial analysis, accounting and budgeting, health, physics and radiation, protection, and human resources. They left out meteorologists, though I'm offended. But the point I'm trying to make here is that decommission, we're not just talking about economics, we're talking about from rubber bands to airplanes, soup to nuts here. And I think certainly it's laudable that UMass is going to look into this process here. In fact, a couple days ago, before I move on, I'm going to tie all this thought in together in a moment, but I just want to mention that Paul and Chuck had received a copy of the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee charter. I guess the state has established a 19-member Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Committee. Most positions are reserved for appointment by the political hierarchy, governor, legislators, state agencies, etc. It does include local representation in adjacent Mass and New Hampshire entities. Paul looked at this a little bit more closely, though, and Paul's opinion was that he read the charter. It's a high-level group, state reps, senators, DPH, few town members. Don't believe it serves the town of Vernon. rather state level issues. Remember, they've been shut down for about a year there at a different point in the process. So all that said, I'm just going to throw some thoughts and questions out for the committee here for some discussion. But my take on all this at the moment is that our town wants UMass to come up with some educational materials to guide the town officials on if the town, in concert perhaps with some other surrounding entity town, want to come up with a decommissioning panel here to serve our best interests. But in terms of past and recent precedents in New England, it appears, at least from this limited sample, that these commissions or committees are being also done at the state level. And how much interaction or involvement the locals get remains to be seen. If that's the case, there could be some scenarios once Entergy does permanently close Pilgrim where Governor Baker, whoever the governor is at that time, could say, okay, we're gonna do like Maine Yankee did or Vermont Yankee. So let's say our town has spent time and resources to try to ramp up okay, now we're ready to form our, now are we gonna work in parallel with the state if that happens? Are we gonna get absorbed? Are we gonna, or whatever there? And that also brings up a question about even our own nuclear committee here. If our town decides we're going to have our own decommissioning committee, Citizens Advisory Committee, for the sake of argument, and you want to start involving all these different disciplines and things, our committee here has specialists, people knowledgeable about certain things, or other people who may not be specifically specialized but have, I mean, Jeff has been on the committee since the outhouse was created here, so I think he would be very valuable to be on a committee, even though he's not a scientist, but people like Jeff, you know. But the point I'm trying to make is that I'm hoping our town officials will be thinking about roles and responsibilities, not just what can I know talking with Ken Saturday at the end of the town meeting there that he said he was going to have some new charges and assignments for our committee, Nuclear Matters Committee, based on Entergy's announcement last week. So I'm hoping that at some point in the foreseeable that we'll get some guidance so we're not a ship drifting without a rudder in the Atlantic Ocean. But I know you're going to, but just to finish my thought here, at some point down the road that we can get together with our Board of Selectmen, put our heads together, and try to figure out where, not only where we've been fitting in now, we do have our charter mission statement, as I read in my opening remarks, we still have an operating plant, and there's still things to do that are going to be doing, but at some point, the plant will not be operating, will be in, so, if there's going to be a Citizens Advisory Committee, would our committee get absorbed? Would we be working in parallel? Would we be a buffer between the Board of Selectmen? I don't have the answers. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just throwing all this out, food for thought.
Well, let me assuage your fears.
Not fears, just thoughts.
I think you need to give us a little time, because we need to digest a few things also. And then just having come out of a town meeting, that took a lot of preparation. But there has been some discussion, and obviously we're going to depend on you people. What roles you take have yet to be determined, but certainly we value your input, and certainly we will be giving you some tasks. I would say give us a few weeks, a couple of weeks here to get thoughts back on track here.
Sure.
And certainly stuff is going to come down to you because you're our eyes and ears. Like I said, I've had limited construction experience. Houses, roads, things like that. This is out of my field. I can listen to you and I can absorb a lot only because I've been here 22 years. But this is your department, so you will be having some tasks.
Okay, on that regard, I'll make sure that I don't allow anyone to resign from the NMC. That's not a threat.
Including you.
Including me. Heather?
Is the, Board of Selectmen meeting with the NOC tomorrow? Is there a meeting in Boston, or I thought I had read something?
There might be, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I'm not aware of that, but there's still, there are still ongoing negotiations, so there's all kind of things going on with the plant. There was a meeting with the delegation. Ken could do better on that because he's been going to most of them. I'm not aware of the meeting tomorrow, they could be.
Frank, I got an assignment request. Since I gave you a statement today, I read from the newspaper article, you'll be attending UMass's seminar this coming Wednesday.
Yes.
One thing I'd be interested in learning, or committee might be interested in learning, is UMass already did an in-depth phase 1 study and presentation on May 19th. Only going by the newspaper articles in the Globe and the well-written article you had in the OCM, I'd be very interested in knowing how much you find out from the seminar that differs or updates or changes anything that may be presented from what UMass has already done for the town of Plymouth. I'd be curious are they just basically, are you going to find out that with the, I don't know if the attendees were by invitation or certainly no one on our committee.
There's a broader conference and a lot of communities, apart from Plymouth, are represented, and one of the things they obviously hope to gain there is some comparative information, how other communities are dealing or not dealing with these issues, or have insights and strategies. I think that's that's always one of the easiest ways to learn what not to do or to do is where others have tread before you. So
yeah.
I mean, it's part of a broader conference as well, but it's one day devoted to this. I think the town is going up as well. The town has a lot of people.
I think Lee Hartman and Jessica.
Right.
Yeah, so that, okay, thanks. Joe Lynch. I recognize that name from Entergy. So, in any event, it'll be a good place to be networking with people there in terms of meeting people, and if you have an opportunity yourself to hear what certain town issues are different, like Plymouth, are they different? Is there something that we haven't considered? And also, if the substantive discussions are they pretty much what we've already heard already from UMass for Plymouth, and then just trying to get everybody sort of up to speed to where Plymouth is in terms of May 19th. But if there's any new revelations there, I'd be certainly happy to read about it in the newspaper. So, again, you and also Matt has been doing a great job covering. I couldn't have been up to speed any better than I was without your well-written news articles. So thank you for the work that you do too when things happen to hit the fan. Okay, did anyone have any questions or comments about UMass? I just there was something, Jeff, that maybe it was a Boston Globe article that you or Paul circulated, but the writer was talking about someone who's going to be about there ought to be a coalition of host communities. And David, you may remember that I know that when Jeff had spearheaded the 2006, January 2006 relicensing recommendation report for Pilgrim there, that was one of our committee's recommendations, that the town should consider host community.
It was basically an alliance of the community.
Yeah. So, and there's just something in the top 5 issues report. I think we covered, between hiring an expert legal firm like Dwayne Morris. That was the other action item that got implemented there by, I guess, during Belinda's tenure on the select board there.
Prior to that.
Or,
Dwayne Morris was on board when I was there.
I'm sorry, when?
Dwayne Morris was on board when I was in there, my last iteration.
Oh, okay. But anyway, so that was this. But anyways, as you know, for reasons we explained in our report, from that things didn't seem to go anywhere in the town. In fact, the town took there was a web link on the town's website for that. It was taken off, I think, about a year or so ago. So, but it's interesting that the same thought is coming up for So Frank, if you happen to hear anything further on that, considering our town had tried that, that shows that a different way to bake bread.
I think it's a case of you don't miss your water till your well runs dry. You couldn't, you know, I don't know how many communities there are, 90, 100 in the nation. But very hard to get them to believe that they need to plan, just like people that have an air base or some other institution that has what they think is a permanent fixture, but really has a lifespan of 50 to 75 years, and when it goes, 90%, 95% or more are unprepared. So I don't think there's a chance of getting people to really coordinate themselves unless they really feel they're in jeopardy, and very few anticipate in that way. But these will be people all in jeopardy, right? These will people will be all within 5 to 10 years of serious consideration. So you know how many that is, I don't know.
Jeff,
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, because I know you're exactly right, because we mailed out stuff to a lot of communities and got virtually no response. And I think part of the problem is just denial of future vulnerability. And, that's exactly it. So I think that this meeting should be especially valuable.
Can anybody go to that meeting?
Costs money.
I don't, I looked it up, Paul. There was no indication there of whether you get invited, whether you can attend. It appears to me that it would be on invite. I know Lee's going, somebody else is going with Lee.
Just in case.
And
I
then
think you just have
Frank.
to register.
Francis, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry, Francis.
I'm sorry. Let me just weigh in too. Back in 2003, when Ellie, Beth, Dave Rushforth, and Kenny Tavares went to Yucca Mountain, right after that, there was a flurry of communication with other communities. Nothing came of that. So you can kind of lead them to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah, exactly.
interesting. Thanks for the historical perspective, because I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I'm good for all kinds of information.
That's why we're glad you're here tonight. You picked the perfect. Let's move on to the next bullet. We discussed this a little bit before the Revenue Idea Task Force presentation to the Board of Selectmen, spent nuclear fuel storage. I wasn't there at the time, but I'm just curious, Dave, from the town's perspective, did the town have any reaction in terms of the Board of Selectmen, I should say, when I speak of the town, as far as what they heard is something that they want further studied?
Well,
did they want any opinions from our committee, or just?
Well, maybe not at this particular time,
Right.
probably in the future, but correct me if I'm wrong, it would take a change in legislation to get any kind of a taxable value here, because the way I always understood it, going back from, like I say, my various times on the board, by the utilities contributing to the nuclear waste mitigation fund, which is like $30 billion or something like that, even after taking out for the development of the defunct Yucca Mountain. But by contributing to that fund, was it not a sort of a de facto ownership of the nuclear waste? Doesn't the federal government control that nuclear waste? We have no taxable ability, and it would take a change in legislation to have that taxable ability.
One thing we learned, I think it was earlier this year, because both Mary Lampert and I were querying NRC about that whole topic, and in terms of ownership. I think we addressed that a bit in the top 5 issues report, but the bottom line is DOE does not take title or ownership until the fuel leaves the site to go to at least a permanent repository, or if there were to be an NRC sanctioned licensed interim repository. So at the moment, ownership could be an Energy's back, which brings up other issues in terms of if Energy, for the sake of argument, wanted to ship the fuel off-site somewhere else, there could be risks and liabilities. If there was a spill, a problem at the off-site IFC, that could come back to them. So there are issues with that. I think, in talking with Mary, she and I concluded that it really takes a change in regulatory legislation here to make life easier for licensees and host communities. But till an interim SC is going to get built in New Mexico, as we talked earlier, wherever, or Yucca Mountain gets resolved or something else there, that probably nothing's going to happen during the interim. Paul, you?
Not much I can clarify there other than Mr. Dave is licensed to use the fuel. He never really owns the fuel. So you're right, it gets into what is it? And you have a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, so
This is negotiated.
yeah. And I think that might be at risk if one were to just, okay, so we'll throw another tax here and a tax. I heard the presentation of the Board of Selectmen, and as the good presenter, and he was well spoken, but he also said he had no personal knowledge of it. Okay, he knew that other states had bills, but had any money ever changed hands? I don't know. Okay, because on the other side is that at Kiwanee, okay, where the town wanted to encourage the utility to stay by taxing it, okay, a unique approach. Okay, if you shut down, we're going to tax you more than you're paying us now. You can get the courts involved, and if you get the courts involved, then the existing payments can be put in escrow, and then this thing that we're all concerned with, the economics, okay, I mean, it could be upon us sooner. So whatever it is that you do enjoy, what is that law firm?
Dwayne Morris?
Yeah, counsel before an act.
Well, that was one of our soft recommendations. We weren't supposed to have official recommendations in the top ever, but we threw a few little soft ones in there just to warm up the burners. But and we were putting it in the context of the current state legislative bills, that there's been different schools of thought in terms of potential benefits or disbenefits. But to me, if the state legislative bills are going to be vetted later this year, if my intelligence was correct there, then it might be useful for the town to see how that plays itself out before the town tries to even do something on top of that. Not that they can't talk about it, think about it. Heather, do you have any other thought on that?
I just think that it's, something that the Board of Selectmen should look into, and I don't know why you wouldn't want to seek out revenue knowing that Entergy is leaving. I don't know, I'm just getting the vibe that.
I could state it clearly. I think there are revenue sources being suggested that could put at risk what presently is in the pilot, okay? And I would only advise in the strongest sense, okay, that you seek your own legal advice, okay, before what's good for the state is not necessarily good for Plymouth.
It just seems like it would be beneficial for the town and for Entergy that, they were promised something that they didn't get, we were promised something we didn't get. If they sued the Department of Energy to recoup those costs later on down the road.
An interesting premise.
Yeah, in fact, I just want, you're jogging my memory too about something, Paul. I think I may have communicated to you or Jeff just before going on vacation, but tying into our top 5 report soft recommendation, I can't say official recommendation, that if we were suggesting Dwayne Morris look into the state, but they certainly could be looking into the town revenue task force concept to see if there's any legal or regulatory issues associated with that too, from a timing standpoint. Jeff, I'm sorry, Jeff.
Paul, I agree with you this time. We always usually.
Let me take the fence down here.
Okay, it's a situation. I was when I first heard about the plan to tax dry cask storage, I was really skeptical of it, just because I thought it would drive a further wedge between the town and its top source of revenue. And then I heard that since 1994, this has been done in Minnesota. I don't know whether, as you mentioned before, I don't know whether Minnesota has ever received any money as a result of that legislation. And if so, how it happened that they did, whether there's some kind of legislative court to what they do there that allows it. But it just, I just echo what Paul said about Dwight Morris. I think it's really critical.
So if we both agree, wow.
Well, it's interesting because back in the, 80s, early 90s, there was no better politically connected group in Boston than Boston Edison. All their major political affiliations, their board members, or all kind of things. Obviously, that doesn't happen now with an out-of-state operation, but we are pursuing.
Okay.
Good.
Monica, you have a
Yeah, I just
question?
wanted to say that after the announcement that the plant would be closing, I spoke to someone at the Attorney General's office. And we had talked back and forth over the years, but he was interested in revisiting the idea of the federal government being responsible and somehow reimbursing the town for serving as a substitute for Yucca. So the money that's been put aside for Yucca is sitting there, and Plymouth and the other towns that are host communities basically are assuming the responsibility that was supposed to have gone to Yucca. So he is willing to hold a meeting and sit down with stakeholders from the town.
Good.
And we haven't gotten any further from that. I need to talk to them again, so.
Monica, you may want to suggest, since you're in the loop on that, back, I believe, Dave, in December 2014, Entergy filed a suit against DOE to try to recover monies for spent fuel storage like other utilities have successfully done over the years. And I'm wondering if you could work with Entergy to try to get the money from that pot too. I mean, to help out. If Entergy was planning on helping out in some respects, I think they'd be more inclined to do so if they were getting paid whatever they feel they ought to get paid from DOE for that too. So that could be another add-on to the long laundry list. Heather, do you have anything on that, or anyone else?
I have no thoughts.
Yes, you do.
So, and the other thing is, when you talk about the legislative hearings that are upcoming, some of the legislation is in public health, the legislation dealing with the EPZs.
Oh, okay.
Some's in energy, which is the decommissioning and that fund, Senator Wolf's bill. I've seen agendas for both committees, and none of these are posted on any agendas yet. And
Okay.
so
I
they're
think-
taking up other matters, but not
Yeah.
these specific bills.
I don't think it was from Frank or Matt's news articles, but maybe from a Boston Globe article by someone else. But I thought that's what I saw where these were going to be taken up in November or December. But again, I'm going by, but I quickly read over the weekend, so at least it's being discussed. Just
One concern that I've always had ever since I heard about Dan Wolf and talking about it, increasing the size of the EPZ. The NRC is the regulatory body that controls all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, I don't know how the perception ever took flight that the state has any right to do that.
And there's more than one bill.
Yeah.
One's 50 miles, one's.
My own senses, and I'm not I'm certainly not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert at all, but my own sense is that, based on what I know, it wouldn't be enforceable.
Probably not, but I think it's Rep. Cantwell, Rep. Peake, and Senator Wolf, and I think they're what they were hoping to do, I think, was to show that they are equally at risk in their eyes, and their communities are, as much as Plymouth and Kingston and, the towns that are included in the EPZ right now.
So are they doing it symbolically?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think they think it's symbolic,
Mhm.
but you're probably right.
Jeff, my recollection of the 50 miles stems back to Fukushima accident in Yasuko at the time, before everything was known was going to happen or could happen, with all the units there that were having problems. we said, I think American citizenship within 50 miles, which is really more related to the ingestion pathway rather than the relation. But be as it may, I think you're talking about one pilgrim unit here versus a whole ton that they weren't sure if all the pools were going to go or what was going to happen there. And I think a lot of that perception, I know Yasko left the NRC and he had some issues and concerns still, but I think he corrected that perception of why he said what he said at that time. But apparently the 50-mile, you say something there, it's written down there. It's not, it's got a life cycle that's going to continue. So that's what I recall on that. Thanks, Monica, for the update. I'm going to skip the last bullet there, prospective new NRC research initiatives, because obviously we're going to take some direction from the board at some point. So our last topic tonight is revisit top 5 Pilgrim issues report per recent NRC regulatory energy business announcement. And the business announcements I was referring to when I posted the agenda was pertaining to what NRC had put out on September 1st, and then when Entergy came out with its own press releases about starting to look, what they briefed us last month about looking into costs of the plant and what they may want to do or not. But we thought this was a corporate decision is going to be made later this year or early next year, but obviously corporate decided not to wait on this. And David, for your benefit, we had thought that following the May 19th presentation of our April top 5 report that we were going to be meeting with the Board of Selectmen the following month or so. The board was busy on a lot of things, so that never happened, and almost 6 months have passed there. And I think last month we were discussing a little bit, or even after our meeting, that since so much time has passed, and then we also learned that we were supposed to have a meeting with a joint session tomorrow with the Board of Selectmen. That got canceled back in late September, and contact was Ken decided he had to cancel. I guess maybe it was because he didn't know if town meeting was going to run. We didn't schedule that meeting date. That's what I think Melissa's office had at the time when I visited earlier in September. But be as it may, time was passing. We thought that the next, even though we weren't asked to develop formal recommendations, it's part of our our April 6th top 5 issues report. It wouldn't hurt to, we had some soft recommendations in there. We were thinking of maybe trying to flesh it out a little bit, just not to necessarily submit it to the Board of Selectmen, but just to have it ready, and it could be a evolving thing in case the Board of Selectmen said, you know what, we got the top 5 report there, let's develop some recommendations. So we're going to try to hit the road running on that. So we were going to get ready to do that tonight, but we decided, I think I know it's running late. I'd like to talk about that a little bit there, but we can continue this into next month's discussion. But I was conferring a bit with Rich Grassi today, and he reminded me, didn't have to remind me, but he reminded me that really we ought to now be thinking about the impact of Entergy's planned closure in the future announcement in terms of topics, analyses, future recommendations, and anything we said, anything we haven't said. Rich, do you want to talk about that a little further off the top?
No, I reviewed the top 5 issues. Certainly there are aspects of the issues that we wrote that are definitely impacted by the closure decommissioning announcement, and I think that it would behoove us and the town to go back, if we're going to make a formal presentation. I don't know what you just said.
Sure, it's good.
Are we going to make one?
Oh, no, all I'm saying is, well, it hasn't been.
My head is so battered now from all the
Your
different
head, you know what?
angles
Your head
you've
was
given
fine.
that I swear to God, I'm all confused.
No, the meeting that was canceled hasn't been rescheduled yet for us to meet with the Board of Selectmen, the one that we were gonna have tomorrow. So
Yeah, I know
that's
that.
sort of.
I know that.
Okay, so.
So are we going to be I mean, the top 5 issues report is something we prepared at the behest of the
Selectman Tavares
Yeah.
in May or April. And I thought we were going to, but I don't know, because we haven't received any feedback. I haven't heard any.
Well, I think the only feedback we had was going by following our May 19th presentation, where Ken was saying remember, he didn't allow Q&A from the public who was sitting out there. I think the Board of Selectmen was doggone tired that night. They'd been meeting earlier in the day with the governor, and there was 2 other presentations before me, so Ken sort of even cut my time short to do the presentation there. I don't know how the hell I did it, but I got it done. But that's sort of how things were left, and that Ken wanted us to come back in to talk further about it. And maybe if the board had more time to digest things, think about things, they'd have some other questions. Ken probably would allow the public audience to ask questions too, as he normally does when presentations are being done. So that's sort of how things were left. And several months have marched on, and I thought we were going to meet tomorrow. We're not. But as I said before, we were originally planning to work on, revisiting the report and seeing if
Is it necessary for us to do that?
Well, that's what. Well,
Yeah, aren't the top 5 issues a moot point on a plant that's going away in 2019?
Well,
no, because the plant is still operating for another couple of years,
Correct.
and some of the issues
Yeah.
still exist, and we
Correct.
touched upon some of the issues that relate to decommissioning. There are other probably issues that are coming up now because of Entergy's announcement last week, but at the same time, I think we didn't have any formal recommendations for the Board of Selectmen at their request, and
But Energy is going to be dealing with issues that are directed to them with the NRC. Us trying to hash up some new issues is not going to have any impact whatsoever.
whatever Entergy is doing or not doing with NRC is one thing, but they've been dealing with NRC all along, and we've come out with 3 reports since 2005. The first 2 with recommendations. Jeff did the one in 2006. Rich did the update in 2010. I did this one. There's in terms of spearheading this year. I don't disagree with you, Jim, but I think there's things that our committee certainly needs to monitor. You go back to our charter and read things there. Basically, what our report is doing the things that our charter has been telling us to do.
I believe that Jim is right. I believe that now that we have a closure after the top 5 issues,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of places the issues in some sort of a limbo.
Right. I don't disagree by it.
And that we should, to go further on and make recommendations would be making recommendations or comments on issues that we haven't even had validated by the Board of Selectmen. And they haven't even heard of them. Even during a presentation, we can make modifications to those issues. So, I think I agree with Jim. I think we're okay, that we just need further guidance, that's all.
Yeah.
If I can make one.
Well, let me just say, I don't disagree with either of you. I was basically reviewing where we, for Dave's benefit too, where we had been and where we are at the moment there, and that we had some soft recommendations there. I wasn't suggesting we sit down now and let's develop hard recommendations starting
Thank
tonight
God.
for 10.
I was gonna suggest a car wash.
Because I'm gonna have Mr. Simpson, like Mr. Howe does at our town meeting, call the question there, and we'll be out of here in a few minutes. But I think that this is something that I agree. Once we get more direction, this is what I was struggling with the other night or two in terms of what we had originally planned to do, and I think I started alluding to the committee folks that maybe we don't, at least don't even do it more formally.
I've read every single issue today, and to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't see a lot of change.
Yeah.
I did not.
Well, in terms
I think that those were all valid prior decommissioning, prior closure announcement issues that are still relevant.
But I agree. But aside from the soft recommendations, did you come up, at least start thinking, or did you see any possibility for other recommendations based on what's there already?
Definitely, but I don't, like
But you wanna wait, okay, so you wanna wait till we get a little
No,
more
I
direction?
think like David said, everybody is in a motion right now, where are we, what are we gonna do? What's out there, what's available? And I think that, until we come to some sort of a static position, that, it's better for us to just sit on these.
I'd like to just second what Rich said. I agree with that. I think at this point, the Board of Selectmen has a hell of a lot on its plate.
Right.
And, I think it's up to them to say, to validate what we've written and then give us marching orders.
We have three issues. One, the plan is gonna operate at least until 2019.
Well, 17.
Well, maybe.
No, at least. Excuse me, maybe, or, let me just say the three. 2019 or 2017, all right? We still have to fulfill our role as a committee, to monitor plant operations, to do the things that we've been doing for years.
Yep.
Number two, closure has economic issues that are very wide, that UMass has been commissioned to study, and now they have a follow-on study. Closure, for us, that's your problem. It's not our problem, so to speak, right? We hadn't been consulted on the UMass study. We didn't have any input on it. We might have had some, but I reread the UMass study today. I thought it was excellent. I really enjoyed reading. It was very, and they had an intern write it. Did you see that? That was awesome. And then the third issue is decommissioning, and there we have a role. Right.
I have no problem tabling that, again, what we were thinking about for all reasons discussed, and I think I'll probably put in next month's agenda placeholder for, basically we'll be awaiting any update on BOS guidance, relative follow-up on the revisiting the top 5 report or something along those lines there, and we're sort of in a, as they say in the power business there, the burners are on warm standby from that standpoint.
Yeah. And I'll bring these concerns back to the chairman.
Yeah.
And he's fully aware of them. He's not, he's been around longer, well, no, I've been around longer than him. He's been around a good long time. This has been an extremely hectic period of time, and we haven't forgotten you. It's just that it seems like things come at you from all angles. And I noticed that when I came back in May. Matter of fact, I said to the town manager, what would you have done if you had 2 inexperienced, new selectmen? She said, boy, I thank God every day that the 2 of you are back, because now I've been going for 5 years, so I need to be brought up to speed, don't misunderstand me. But just to have, experience versus 2 new people, she said, I thank God every day that that's happened. So, we haven't forgotten you, and we will be back to you, and I will pass these concerns on to Ken. He's fully aware of them. He said that tonight. Tell him we haven't forgotten him, But it's just right now, I think we need a week or 2 just to clear our brains for everything that's come at us. We've had lease problems. We've had difficult negotiations. There's all kind of things that get thrown at us when you sit in my seat, and that's fine. We're big boys. We'll handle it, But we'll get back to you. I do have something other to discuss on the other issues when you get to that point.
Sure. Dave, just to close that thought, I think since I'm glad you're here tonight, and certainly feel free. I know John is our liaison, but he seems to get pulled in a lot of different directions as of late too. So
we all do.
No, so certainly feel free, for continuity, if you might, even if he's coming to a meeting, if you've got the time and interest, we'd certainly welcome your presence at not all, but just future meetings if you feel the agenda might be more importantly for you to follow up on there. But one thing I think that would make our committee's lives easier, it's communications there. As I was mentioning earlier, a lot of times we don't find out about things till we may even see it in the newspaper about this meeting taking place or involving this or that or meeting with the NRC or whatever there. So it'd be nice if our committee could be at some of these meetings, unless the board feels that there could be some very sensitive things being discussed and they just want to keep it at the board level, but
Oh,
even just
no.
knowing,
No,
even just
I-
knowing that meetings are taking place
Yeah.
on this topic there, so if we know ahead of time, then even if we're not present, we can say, oh, by the way, could you remember to ask this or that or whatever there? Just trying to look out for the board's and town's best interest. But if we don't know about what's going on, it just makes our jobs a little harder, at least to dovetail in as an advisory committee to the town there. But this has been going on for quite some time.
Well,
I'll
I'll tell you,
and it's something that, now that you're back on the board there, and you've had some history, certainly a lot of history, that anything you consider do to help that would be most welcome by our committee.
oh, and I'm perfectly willing to do that, but what you just said happens to us on our level also. One of the meetings that you mentioned, and I won't go into details because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but one of the meetings that you mentioned was orchestrated completely without the chairman's knowledge.
Oh,
Completely. So, sometimes we get left out of the loop too, as strange as that might sound. But you're right. I mean, the whole thing with anything, whether it's government, whether it's a business, it's communication. Communication between the CEO and the supervisors, communication between the selectmen and the committees, communication between the state and the local. So it's an ongoing problem. It'll probably never stop, but fully aware of that too.
appreciate that. I'm sorry, you had some, David, you
Well,
said
I
you
just
had some other
wanted to
issues.
say something to Entergy. You've got a possible tour coming up for new members. I've been through your plant 6 times. More frequently back in the days of Bob Kiz, so that goes back to the 80s. Back then, you could walk in and ask for a tour unannounced. 9/11 stopped that, obviously. But my 6th tour was with the Boy Scout troop. And I got a complete tour from one of your plant operators. His first name is Jeff. Little short guy. Took us places. Jeff Ahurst. Took us in places where I had never gone as a selectman. I had never seen the generators. I had never seen, and as soon as I walked into the room, as soon as he took us into the room, I knew instantly what it was. Boron injection. I had never seen that as a selectman. And that is something that I think is important for selectmen to know, that factor of safety exists. Because prior to that, I assumed the control rods go up. It takes time for the reaction to stop because they absorb the neutrons or whatever the hell they are. But boron injection is instantaneous. I never knew that safeguard existed. So I would ask, when you give these tours, try to make them as complete as possible without jeopardizing anything that could be jeopardized. I've been up on the refuel floor when refueling is going on. That I realize is a safety issue now. Like I say, back with Bob Tiz, it was much more laid back. It was much more easy to accomplish. But just the fact that there were parts of the plant that I had never seen until I went with the Boy Scouts. So I would ask you, please be as informative as you can.
That's good advice. A lot of times we're up against clocks with people's schedules, but that's great advice.
Before we adjourn, Megan, I think you may have an announcement for the group here.
Sure.
Megan,
Oh,
Megan Ho. Friday is my last day with Entergy, so I accepted a position outside of the company, and I start Monday, so it's a quick turnaround, but I just wanted to thank the committee for all of your work and your support and your partnership. I don't want to speak for Dave, but I think we've had a good working relationship the past 2+ years, so I thank you all for that. It's much appreciated, and I will miss everybody. I'll miss working with you, so thank you.
I'll bet you'll miss that commute, huh?
I know, yeah, I'm okay, I'll be working from home, so it's a little bit nicer.
And just as
There you
a
go.
point of administrative order, that although Megan's been the point person providing our committee with updates and announcements, because Lauren will be serving at the moment in that capacity?
Yeah, we're
or
juggling.
Okay, just so we
Yeah.
know, who-
You will not,
but at least in terms of the plant visits, Lauren is still, but any other communications, I'll find out who
It will likely be Joyce.
Oh, Joyce McMahon,
Mhm.
okay, that's fine.
Mhm.
Okay. Did anybody else have any other comments or questions before I ask for a motion?
I would just say thank
Yeah.
you to Megan, you've been so great about reaching out before things